Good afternoon and welcome to Sound Advice Live. I'm Angela Lamont and today I'm joined by a dazzling array of experts to answer your questions and make sure that if you're thinking of changing up your TV, your hi-fi or your home cinema, that you're confident that the one you're going to pick is the right one for you. Now throughout the show, as well as the experts here on screen with me, we also have experts in the chat. So please feel free to put your questions to our experts in the YouTube chat. And let us know about anything else that's bothering you to do with TVs, hi-fi and home cinema, any decisions you're wrangling with, what's making it difficult for you to make a buying decision right now, for example, and suggest what kind of bits of kit you'd like to see us put through their paces as well. We have Michelle in the chat room too. She'll be helping to get your questions answered. She'll be putting the questions through to us in the studio, and she's got lots of really useful links about bits of kit as well that she can drop into the chat room. If you're having problems asking questions at the moment, that's because we've turned it on to the mode where only subscribers can ask questions. It's not a ploy, it's because there's a lot of spam bots out there and they can ruin a YouTube chat. So we want to make sure everyone in our chat is a lovely living, breathing human and not a spam bot. So if you hit subscribe in 5 minutes, you'll be able to chat and ask questions. Of course, at the end of the show, if you want to unsubscribe, that's absolutely fine. But if you do stay subscribed, then you'll get to find out when the next Sound Advice Live is coming up. And in the case of today, that won't be long because today we have not one, but 2 Sound Advice Live shows for you. And in the first one, we will be mostly talking TVs. But before we do that, as it's our first live show, let's meet some of the people behind the scenes at Sound Advice and find out how it came about in the first place. So right now, I am delighted to be joined by Bruce Black, one of the founders of Sound Advice, and from our expert panel, Ed Selley, who has not only tested and reviewed hi-fi kit for 14 years now, he's also built it, assembled it, helped design it, written manuals on it, installed it, you name it, he's done it. So if you have any questions for Bruce and Ed, pop them in the chat right now. So thank you both for joining me.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
So, Bruce, there are lots of sources of information on hi-fi and TV and home cinema. There's loads of websites, there's some great magazines. So why do we need another source of information right now?
Thanks, Angela. We started looking at this project a couple of years ago about what we could do that would provide a more rounded type of information for people. My partner and I have been working within consumer electronics and hi-fi publishing for God knows how many years. I started on a typewriter, for goodness sake. And we wanted to try and get people that aren't nerdy, not experts on tech and stuff like that, to be able to give them the information where they feel confident about being able to go and buy something. So we assembled this team of reviewers who, in my view, are the best in the world. It's a bold claim, but I think they are. I trust them. They can write, they can explain. There's nothing better. But the big difference that we've got is that a reader or a viewer on the website can talk to those reviewers directly themselves. They can book an appointment for 15 minutes to say, this is me. Is my situation different to what you're saying in terms of what kind of equipment you would recommend? And then the final part of that is that we will then take that customer who's been through a consultation with someone like Ed and recommend to them their local specialist retailer who will hold their hand in terms of being able to try the equipment out at home or install the equipment. So we're trying to do the whole circle of things really for people.
That sounds excellent, that it's not just another place serving up the information, if you like. There's some listening and interacting going on there, which sounds a little bit like having an expert friend, someone to talk to when it comes to hi-fi and TVs. Although, of course, a lot of real expert friends are very opinionated friends who think they're experts, whereas, Ed, you're one of those real experts. So why did you want to get involved in Sound Advice Live?
Well, when Bruce explained the concept, it resonated with me simply because there is this fear, I suppose is the right way to put it, that you are in some of the more mainstream work that we do. We are, if you like, speaking to a closed circle of committed enthusiasts, and there is a worry that you're not reaching out to a wider audience. And the premise of Sound Advice, taking what we do, ensuring that what we do is tailored to suit a wider audience than that committed circle, and then helping people directly to join and start to make informed decisions. It just made a huge amount of sense to me. There is that, it's as old as I am, there's that sketch on Not the 9 O'Clock News, the legendary gramophone sketch. Once you finish the live chat, you can view it on YouTube. It's the fear of that closed circle of knowledge being sort of protected and only doled out sparingly and reluctantly. And this is the perfect antidote to that. It's ensuring that people can go to make what are very serious and significant purchasing decisions with the very best and impartial advice that we can provide them.
I'm sure they'll be rushing to watch that Not the 9 O'Clock News show after the show has ended, though, not
Afterwards.
now. But you're right. It's good to have that honesty and that sincerity, and talk to someone who knows what they're talking about. But Bruce, because of this honesty and this, you need a lot of trust in someone. If you're going to spend a lot of money, you need a lot of trust in someone. And of course, if you go into a store that only sells one brand, they're going to recommend that brand. The thing about this is that it's independent, but how can we be comfortable that you are all truly independent?
I think it's such an important part, and it's been there from the absolute outset of what we wanted to do was to maintain that independence, totally maintain the independence from the reviewers. And the guys that we have and girls that we have picked for doing this, I've worked with them for years and years and years, and that's why we've picked them, because I trust them. There's nothing more than that. The independence, we keep stating that the site is different in so much as people like Ed have said they don't want to waste their time writing a crap review of a product that is not any good. So the products that are all recommended. These are the best of the best of the products. There's no payment from the manufacturers involved in it. We're funding the whole website. Our business model is that if a manufacturer wants to pay for the advertising of that product on YouTube, on Google, or on Facebook, or on Bing, something like that, they can contribute for doing that. Other than that, we are funding the reviewers of how much we pay, what we pay for the reviews and everything else. There's no ads on the site at all for that reason. We can't stand advertising on sites or pop-ups or anything like that. So all of that's clean. We've taken all of that out, and we're doing it in this way. But it's a bit like trust me, Gov. I know, but these boys are above all that. That's all I can say.
So Ed, you're a part of that team that Bruce is talking about. And you're quite a seasoned bunch between you. I don't know if you know how many years experience you've got between you, but do you all have your own niches, your own specialisms, and that you tend to work more in one area than another?
Oh, for sure. Obviously, I am not going to be going anywhere near the television and home cinema side of things. I have reviewed home cinema in the past, but I would regard myself as having fallen out of doing that on a regular basis. So we have the cream of the crop for television reviewers. We have the best AV reviewers, and in terms of the width of knowledge across the different disciplines of stereo. So everything from full analog turntable front end, valve amplifiers, and all the way through to multi-room and streaming. Across the people that we've assembled for this, we can cover all of that, and not in I've dabbled in it, it will be fine, as in, we have spent collectively a length of time that I dread to think about, Angela, accruing the advice that the experience that we have to get this done. So yes, we don't just get allocated stuff at random. We are specialists in different fields, and Bruce has really managed to accrue a very decent team of people, and me. So yeah, all good.
Thank you very much. So now we know a little bit more about Sound Advice, and this is our first Sound Advice Live. The website's been there a little bit, and you can book appointments with experts and all that kind of thing. We've got people jumping into the chat and wishing us all good luck with this new live part of the proceedings. Lewis is in the West Country in the UK. Home cinema in general being my thing, not today though, it's too hot, he says. So we're mostly talking TVs today, Lewis, although stay tuned for future shows. You never know what we might take care of on those shows. But thanks for telling us more about Sound Advice, Bruce and Ed, and how it came about. Thanks for joining us today. So next up, we're going to be talking mostly TVs. Now, a lot of requests and come into Sound Advice asking for what to look out for when you're buying a TV, because the new tech comes along so quickly and it can be hard to judge when to jump in. Are you going to let some technological advancement become mature, or if you do, will you have missed the boat? Will the next thing be along in 5 minutes? So it can be difficult to judge what features will really benefit you and your lifestyle, and when to jump in and actually make a purchase rather than just looking. So today I'm joined by two Sound Advice experts to give us their top tips, translate the acronyms and explain the tech. And they are Steve Withers and Verity Burns. Thank you for joining me. And of course, if you're watching, if you have any questions about TVs or buying a TV, if you're wrestling with that decision, pop your questions in the chat. So my first question for you two is, TVs have been getting markedly bigger in the last decade or so. Does size still matter? Should we just keep going bigger for the sake of it? Or should we think about what budget we've got and spend it on other features other than size?
Well, you're absolutely right. When it comes to TVs, size does matter. And I'm unfortunately old enough to remember when a big TV was a 28-inch. So these days, the average size is probably about 42 to 48 inches. And they're getting cheaper and bigger. And my advice is always, and this is based on bitter personal experience, get the biggest TV that you can afford and you can fit in your room, because there is nothing worse than unpacking your new TV, setting it up and immediately thinking, I should have got a bigger size. I've done that myself, bought a 55-inch OLED, set it up and immediately thought, should have got a 55-inch OLED. Big mistake. So I know some people might think it's a bit gauche and garish to have a large TV, but when you consider how much time you spend sat in front of it, when you consider that a lot of the new streaming shows are shot like movies, and unlike TV shows may have smaller things in the frame than big close-ups, the larger your screen size, the more immersive and the more cinematic your experience. So yeah, definitely. I mean, when you can get something like a 77-inch OLED for about $3,000 now, I mean, that's a lot of TV for not a massive outlay when you consider how much use you're going to get out of it. So my advice is always go big or go broke.
It is a bit of a shocker though, isn't it? I remember I went from something like a 32-inch to a 55 in one jump. Put the TV there, switched it on, the news was on. Newsreader's head was bigger than mine. You know, it was quite a different experience that needed some adjusting to, and they are absolutely huge now, and we are reviewing a couple of large televisions later on. But with regard, once you've chosen what size suits you, with regard as to the tech, I mean, it used to be a question of LCD or OLED, and now we've got QLED and QD OLED, and guide us through that lot.
Well, basically you've got two key technologies, LCD, which has been around for years, and you've got OLED, which has been around for about the last 10 years. The benefits of LCD tend to be that they're a lot brighter. They also don't suffer from things like image retention or screen burn, so very good for gamers, where they have long gaming sessions with things on the screen for long periods of time. And they also tend to be quite competitively priced. OLED, on the other hand, not quite as bright as an LCD, but amazing black levels, incredible contrast performance, the best you can get. And also because they're self-emissive, so every single pixel lights itself up, you get very precise highlights, so bright things are incredibly precisely delivered. So that's a general difference. There are variations in terms, they've been doing things to LCDs to make them more like OLEDs. So things like mini LEDs use lots of tiny little LEDs behind the panel and lots of dimming zones, maybe 2,000-3,000 dimming zones to kind of eliminate blooming or haloing around bright objects against dark backgrounds. And that's kind of, in a way, trying to deliver the brightness of an LCD with the black levels and contrast performance of an OLED. And they are getting very good at it. But when you consider that an OLED, essentially, if it's a 4K OLED, has over 8 million individual dimming zones, that's every single pixel, they've never quite reached that level of precision. And also, OLEDs are getting brighter. OLEDs in the last couple of years have been approaching 1,000 nits of peak brightness. And now you've got QD OLED, which is essentially an OLED that uses quantum dots to deliver really precise, really accurate colors, purer colors, much wider colors, and also a lot more brightness. Then, it's a debate. But generally, I think if you're a film fan, you should probably be looking at OLED. And if you're a gamer, be looking at LCD.
Thank you. So, Verity, can I ask you now, if someone is wrestling with a decision about buying a TV, what kind of things would you say to look out for right now if someone's having to make that decision in the next month or two?
Well, I still get asked whether 4K is the thing to go for, and absolutely 4K is all you should be really considering now. It's quite difficult to find full HD now, and most people probably will be stepping up from full HD, and 4K is. For a long time there wasn't the content, but now there really is the content. You can get 4K. Content on Netflix, on YouTube, and obviously you can get 4K Blu-rays, and even iPlayer and Sky are broadcasting some things in 4K as well. So absolutely 4K is the thing to go for, and also HDR is another thing that can confuse some people because there's a lot of acronyms involved. But HDR is absolutely a thing you should be looking out for. There are some manufacturers who it's happening less now, but perhaps on the lower budget 4K TVs, HDR isn't always catered for quite as well. But looking out for one of the advanced formats, something like Dolby Vision or HDR10 Plus, they are the more advanced HDR formats, and basically what that's going to do is just give you incredible depth of color. It's going to improve highlights. So you're going to be able to, when you see a bright light, instead of just seeing a bright light, you're going to have that depth. You're going to have and the same in the shadows as well. So, but the difference between standard HDR and the more advanced formats is that it's just more precise. Every single frame you're seeing. Dynamic metadata is adjusting every single frame to make sure that you're getting exactly what the cinematographer wanted you to see. The more original forms of HDR kind of just set the same level across the board, so not quite as good.
I remember in the old days, if you were seeing somebody talking and there was black velvet curtains in the background, it would just be a block of black. These days with HDR10, you can see every fold in that curtain, and if they're velvet, you can see the tiny little highlights on them. That probably doesn't sound very exciting, looking at black velvet curtains, but you know what I mean. If you're watching films with darker scenes, you can suddenly distinguish things that you didn't even know were there before, and so that does make quite a difference. We're nearly out of time, but do you have any top tips for us, very briefly, just to end?
Well, I definitely recommend getting it, particularly if you're a next-gen gamer, so if you've got the latest PlayStation or Xbox. You want to make sure your TV's got HDMI 2.1, because then it can support 4K 120 frames per second gaming, and also things like VRR and ALM, which are other gaming features that are very useful. So HDMI 2.1, very important. Make sure your TV supports that. And as Verity's mentioned, HDR10, HDR is very important. Dolby Vision, I'd say that given that Netflix and Disney Plus and Apple TV and HBO Max and all these other streaming services use Dolby Vision, it's probably best to get a TV that supports it, and most manufacturers do, with one notable exception, which is Samsung, which we might come back to later in this show. But if it's got Dolby Vision support and HDMI 2.1, that'll give you some nice future-proofing for the next few years. Great.
Any last tips from you, Verity?
Something we didn't get to mention, and I just think is important to talk about because it is mainstream now. Is 8K, and is 8K worthwhile? And I think it's a really interesting technology, something to watch. But right now, it wouldn't be something that I would be spending my money on. There's no content. The same problem that we had with 4K right at the very beginning is now the problem with 8K. So by all means, go to your local retailer and have a look at it, and it's fantastic. But the content isn't there to support it right now. So I would steer clear of 8K just right now.
So maybe not be seduced by the 8K quite yet, maybe for the next TV perhaps. Thank you very much for joining me, Steve and Verity, and talking about TVs. And if that has piqued your interest in buying a new telly, then Michelle will pop the link into the YouTube chat with all the current reviews of TVs on the Sound Advice website. And we've got a couple of TV reviews for you coming up next. So, 2 TV reviews for you from independent experts. Remember, the Sound Advice experts tend to work as journalists, and they are fiercely proud of their independence from the manufacturers, which means we can just show you the stuff we think is the best and ignore all the rest of it. So first up, here's Simon Lewis reviewing the Sony A95K OLED TV. Take it away, Simon.
Well, I've been looking at the Sony XR55 A95K QD OLED television, which is a brand new QD OLED TV and a brand new technology. Samsung developed QD OLED. This is the same Samsung that swore it would never get involved in OLED technology, and the only way it's been able to involve itself in this is by finessing the technology to a point that they can call it something else. QD OLED is designed to retain all of the strengths of OLED television, the wide viewing angles, the deep black tones, the pixel level contrasts, and address the one perceived shortcoming of OLED, which is its brightness or its lack thereof. Obviously, Samsung manufactures these panels, but it'll sell them to anyone if the price is right. They've sold some to Sony. Sony have fitted their cognitive processor XR to look after all of the picture quality, and the result is a range called A95K. I've had the 55-inch version on the bench, and very impressive it is too, as it should be at the money. It's, in picture quality terms, I suppose first things first, it's not super bright, which is kind of the reason that QD OLED was developed, was to address this brightness issue. It's not super bright, it's not really that much brighter than the brightest OLED panels that LG manufacture. But what it does do with the bright tones is to offer them real detail and real variation and not just bleach them out. So the contrasts are even wider than you would normally expect from an OLED TV. In every other respect, it's OLED business as usual, which is good news, right? It's blacks are deep and they're varied and they're detailed. The colour balance is lovely once you've trawled through the setup menus. And the viewing angles are excellent. On a technical level, it's got a couple of its HDMI inputs are 2.1 compatible, and that's across the board. So if you've got a next generation games console or something, then Sony's 4K at 120 Hertz, ALLM, VRR, HGig, all the magic abbreviations are in place, and it'll really maximize your next gen console experience, especially if you've got a Sony console. In terms of sound, Sony's been fitting actuators to its OLED TVs for a while now, which basically turns the entire screen into a speaker. And for the A95K, the screen itself is reinforced by a couple of rear-firing subwoofers. So for a television that doesn't even have a visible sound system, it's actually very agreeable indeed in the way that it sounds. really to make an improvement on a TV with an integrated sound system, you'd have to buy a Philips with a Bowers and Wilkins system or a Panasonic with a Technics. Sony knows exactly what it's doing with this technology now, and it works really well. It's quite chunky sounding by the standards of televisions. It's detailed. Sony likes it so much, in fact, that it's fitted spring clips on the back of the TV so that the TV itself can be the center channel in your surround sound system if you fancy that. Don't fancy that. What else can I tell you? The stand. Stand is excellent. Stand lets you can fit the big chunky stand to the front or to the back of the screen. If you fit it to the back, the screen leans back just a little bit for the sake of good viewing angles, and is basically invisible. If you fit it to the front, it means the screen can go right back, almost flush to the wall. It's not the slimmest television you've ever seen. A lot of the appeal of OLED is how slim they are, or can be. This one isn't. This one's over 4 centimetres deep, which is a bit of a throwback, but I guess you have to keep your actuators and your subwoofer somewhere. At launch, this is the thick end of £2,700 at launch, and this is a 55-inch television, so there's no two ways about it. This is a pricey machine. You can buy 55-inch OLED TVs that perform beautifully and that you'd be delighted with for quite a lot less more money than this. But if you want to be an early adopter and get in on the QD OLED ground floor, and you want a TV that sounds great even though it looks like it's not going to be able to make a sound at all, and you want to attach your next-gen console to it and exploit all of the great features of that, as well as just enjoy watching a lovely television, then here's the Sony XR55 A95K.
Well, I'm glad for that money. It's not just a lovely television. But Simon, what's it like to live with? When you do reviews like this, how long do you spend putting a TV through its paces and getting to know all the tech?
I think televisions reveal themselves reasonably quickly. I mean, when you get a telly out of the box and you put it on the stand, that's just, that's the start of it. A TV, especially TVs that are technologically extremely complicated, can take a lot of setting up. When you take them out of the box, they're kind of ready to look good in the showroom, which when it's in the home is just quite like being shouted at. So you need to go through all of the setup menus, and there are plenty of setup menus on this telly, and finesse it to the point that you're happy with. But that's easily done. The remote control is quite useful in that respect. It's quite a nice handset. You get two with this TV, and one of them is horrible and one of them is good. So, you put the horrible one out of the way somewhere. So setup can be a bit laborious, but it's all fine. And once that is done, this is a very painless television to live with. It does what it's supposed to do. It's quite responsive. And it's a treat to watch. It's not the greatest upscaler. 4K content looks amazing, of course, and the full HD stuff that you might get off a Blu-ray disc or from a broadcast TV station looks great too. But if you like to watch daytime telly and repeats of the Sweeney or something, the Sony struggles quite a lot to upscale really antiquated content. But that's, you didn't spend £2,700 on a telly in order to watch the Sweeney, I hope.
Well, I admit watching the Sweeney isn't top of my list, personally. And has this TV hit the shops already, or when is it due for release?
Yeah, no, it's on sale now. It's been on sale for a few weeks, I think. Sony, like everybody else, can be pretty guarded about the success or otherwise of products in the first few months that they're launched. But even if sales aren't enormous, interest will be, because QD OLED. I mean, it's been 5 minutes since the last new television technology, so we are overdue one, and QD OLED is it. And so on a technological level, it's very interesting, and people will be interested. I mean, like I say, it's $2,699. It's a lot of money for a 55-inch TV, even one that's at the cutting edge. But nevertheless, some people need to be the first with new technologies, and if they want to be first with QD OLED, then it's not like they're going to be chucking money away on this.
Thank you very much, Simon. So there you go, a good option for those wanting to explore QD OLED. And Simon is in the chat right now. So if you have any questions for Simon, just pop them in and hopefully he can help you out looking at that if you've got a specific question about the Sony, perhaps. But we also have Steve back with us now. Thanks for joining us again, Steve. And you've been taking a look at a different television. It's the Samsung S95B, which is also a QD OLED panel. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. I think Simon's done a great job there of explaining how QD OLED works. I won't repeat what he said, but as he did point out, it's a Samsung technology. So they're making TVs with QD OLED, and they've sold panels to Sony, who are also making TVs with QD OLED. So I think an interesting comparison would be how the Samsung compares to the Sony. And the first thing I can say is they are considerably cheaper. So the 55-inch S95B is 1899, and the 65 inches for the one that I had in for review is 2799, which is basically the same price as the 55-inch Sony. So big difference in price. Same panel, so that's no difference at all. So basically the difference between the two TVs really is in terms of cosmetics and in terms of the other features that they offer. So performance-wise, the S95B is excellent, superb TV. All the things you'd expect from an OLED, the deep blacks, the fantastic contrast performance, the precise highlights in HDR. Also very bright, well over 1,000 nits when I tested it, which is excellent for an OLED TV. And as Simon mentioned, you get really rich, pure colors thanks to the quantum dot filters. It's interesting. He made a comment about Samsung not being very nice about OLED for the last decade. And interestingly, in their marketing, they don't refer to it as a QD OLED. They just refer to it as an OLED. So they aren't making a big deal about the fact it's a different tech or a different approach to the technology. But it is, as he said, it is slightly different from say, LG's OLED TVs. But yeah, it's got a great picture. The upscaling and image processing is superb. It's one of Samsung's strong points. Design-wise, it's a very sleek, attractive TV. It doesn't look vastly different from the LG and other manufacturers, but I like it. I think it's simple. It's got a nice small stand that you can easily fit onto a smaller surface. You can be easily wall-mounted. It comes with Samsung's Tizen Smart platform, which I really like. It's got a comprehensive selection of streaming apps. So regardless of who you're subscribing with, whether it's Netflix or Amazon or Disney Plus or Apple, whoever, they're all there, plus all the UK catch-up services. It's a slick platform that's easy to navigate and to use. Gives you plenty of recommendations. My only criticism would be, as I alluded to earlier in this live show, that they don't support Dolby Vision. Samsung don't support Dolby Vision on any of their TVs, and they haven't up until now. Quite why is a bit of a mystery. I think they don't like the idea of a third party being involved in their tech. But to be honest, I think they're probably losing sales because people do tend to tick boxes when they're buying new TVs. And given that most of the streaming services do use Dolby Vision to deliver HDR, people think, well, I want that on my TV. So it's a strange choice by Samsung, and I think it might be shooting themselves in the foot a little bit with it. But it doesn't support Dolby Vision. It does support HDR10, which is the basic version of HDR, and HLG, which is used for broadcast HDR. And it does support HDR10 Plus, which is Samsung's alternative to Dolby Vision, but most people don't use it, so it's not widely supported, unfortunately. Interestingly, in terms of the audio side of things, it's not the best TV for audio, I have to say. Although I would recommend if you're buying a really good TV like this, you should also invest in a soundbar and give it a really good sound system. It can output Dolby Atmos to, say, a soundbar via EARC. It's HDMI output. But it doesn't decode it internally. And although Samsung claim it has their object tracking sound system, it has nothing like the number of speakers that you'll find in their high-end LCD TVs, in their QLED TVs. So that's something to be aware of. Unlike the Sony, all 4 HDMI inputs are HDMI 2.1. So whether no matter how many gaming consoles you're using, you can take full advantage of that. So that's a definite play. I don't understand why Sony only do 2 out of 4 on flagship TVs, but on the Samsung, all 4 support it. It doesn't have the One Connect box, which is a feature you'll find on some of Samsung's other flagship TVs. That's quite a cool feature where it means your connections are all separate and there's just one cable going up to the TV. It doesn't have that. All the connections are actually on the TV itself. It does come with the solar-powered remote control, which is great because it means you don't have to change the batteries. It's more eco-friendly. Overall, it's a very slick, very competitively priced package that performs extremely well, and it includes filmmaker mode, something that's also not on a Sony, and that does exactly what it says on the tin. Basically, it's a picture preset that's been developed by filmmakers, so that when you select that, you're seeing what they want you to see in terms of their color accuracy, in terms of things like turning off motion smoothing, so it doesn't look like cheap video, things like that. So I've got to say, overall, it's a great package. It's very competitively priced for what is essentially a new tech. And it looks cool, and it's very, very intuitive to use. So a big thumbs up from me.
And just one last quick question about this one. When Simon reviewed the Sony just now, he said that it had ALLM, VRR, HGig, all the magic abbreviations, specifically for gamers. So you've mentioned using this telly for watching television and for watching films. Is it also suitable for gamers?
It absolutely is. It has all of the features that Simon's just mentioned. Plus, it has an incredibly low input lag, 9.2 milliseconds. So, blink and you miss it. That's if you're a gamer, this is a great TV for gaming. Not only does it have all the gaming features and a very low input lag, it also has a thing called a game bar, which shows you all of your various gaming settings in one easy to see sort of a bar on the bottom of the screen you can bring up during the game and then get rid of once you're finished looking at it. So I think this is a superb gaming TV. And my only caveat would be, as with all OLED TVs, if you are a big gamer who's prone to, say, 12-hour marathon gaming sessions, then do be careful of not having a static image up for too long, because whilst these days screen burn is very rare, you can get some image retention on an OLED sometimes. So just bear that in mind. But otherwise, this is definitely a top draw TV for gamers.
Okay, and one last practical question. So earlier on, we were talking about the size of televisions. We've had a question in from someone living in central London in a small flat. So my sofa is 3 metres from the wall. What size TV would you say is sensible at that distance?
Well, the general guideline is a viewing distance is 1.5 times the diagonal size of the screen. So if it was 50 inches, then you'd be technically 75 inches away. But obviously, because resolution is much higher these days, you can sit very close to a TV without seeing any kind of pixel structure. So I wouldn't necessarily worry about that. I only sit about 3 foot from the screen when I'm testing TVs, and I've had 85-inch TVs in for review, which initially it just seemed ludicrous, but you very quickly get used to them. And then when they get taken away and you put back a 55-inch TV, it looks like a postage stamp. So I wouldn't worry too much about, like I said at the beginning of the show, go for the biggest TV you can afford and you can physically fit in the room. But the more immersive it is, in my opinion, the better the experience, particularly if you're a gamer. I mean, if you're immersed in the game, you can really enjoy it. So technically the rule was 1.5 times the screen size, but I would push that if I was you. I'd go big. Go big. That's always my advice when it comes to TVs.
And if you're going to sit that close to a big TV to test it, the peripheral vision must be kicking in. But thank you very much for your practical advice and your review of the Samsung to go with the review of the Sony that Simon just did. So thank you very much for joining us and doing that. And if you really can't decide which TV you want, but you know that you need to make a decision at some point and you'd like some help, then Michelle will drop the link into the chat on YouTube so that you can link to our experts and have a bit of a chat with them and ask their advice if you want to book a call with Simon or Steve, Verity or any of the experts about what would work for you specifically. Now, talking about you, if you want to do some reviews for us, let us know. Earlier on, I asked Simon how long that he spent reviewing televisions, because I'm interested to know what tech is like to actually live with it. Because let's face it, when you're looking at new tech, you can get seduced by the marketing hype, buy it, bring it home, and it doesn't quite live up to what you'd hoped. Maybe the glossy pictures seduce us. You might love it for a few days and then go off it, or conversely, you might buy a piece of kit that you bought because you couldn't afford the one you wanted, and it actually outperforms your expectations and you're utterly delighted with it. So, can you share your stories with the rest of the Sound Advice community? So Michelle is going to drop the email link into the YouTube chat now. If you email us at Sound Advice, then you could become part of that reviewing community. And rather than an expert review, it would be a what this piece of kit is like to live with it review. So if you'd like to do that, please contact us. Sadly, we are out of time for this show, but we will be back at 2:30 p.m. with another Sound Advice live. Yes, it may be the hottest day of the year, but what better way to spend it than looking at the coolest gear? So you can meet more of our experts, you can get your questions answered, and we will be talking about going green, about streaming, and looking at some very, very, very expensive headphones. Can they possibly be worth it? Find out, join us at 2:30 p.m.